But then here's, I think, something really critical is this is also the point at which gun rights become almost inseparably merged with those other issues, land issues, any kind of government regulation, private property rights. And so a lot of the things that we saw, the standoffs at Ruby Ridge and Waco, those were about Second Amendment and about a reinterpretation of the Second Amendment that, is what we're used to now, that is far more radical.
And so then that takes us up into what you call the Patriot Rebellion, which is sort of, Glenn Beck 912, I guess it is, right. Type of time. And now we're even that much further removed from the issue of land use, but all of these themes now are beginning to converge right. into what ultimately became like you can't pass the Affordable Care Act because it's over 100 pages essentially. So how does this further that, and in what context is that? Does that explain like why people who have never walked on a piece of soil where a cow has fed, were huge Bundy supporters?
Right. Sean Hannity did a week of his show at the Bundy Ranch. And even then in, 2016, I remember Marco Rubio, right, senator from Florida, on his campaign, he was denouncing federal land ownership. And really what that is, that's just sort of making sure there's the nod to the peculiar Western interests within this broader coalition. I think when it's amazing to me. I started this book in, I thought of this book in 2016 during a second Bundy standoff. And
this is the one in Oregon.
Correct. And I had thought about this in 2014 when there was a standoff between the Bundy family and law enforcement at the Bundy Ranch. And at the time, it was sort of mind-boggling. How could this be happening here in the United States? One reporter asked me that. And, fast forward to 2021, and you're kind of like, well, that sort of thing is Tuesday's news, right? We've almost become accustomed to that being a normal part of the American news cycle. And I think when we look back at, I call it the Patriot Rebellion, it coincides perfectly with the Obama administration. We have passage of the Affordable Care Act that is a useful tool, right? But there is this anger against the federal government that's bubbling up. And we have what I would think of as the mainstream Tea Party. And this is espousing a kind of political ideology, a staunch libertarianism. But we also have the growing strength of, I see it as the Tea Party's armed wing. The militia movements like the 3% Patriots. And all of a sudden the line between mainstream and extreme all but disappeared. So at those rallies, that you'd see on the mall that Glenn Beck would host, Glenn Beck would denounce violence, but look out at the crowd and sort of see who's joining him there. Similarly, we started to see, a sort of extreme rhetoric about the potential need to kill federal authorities in defense of one's rights. That became more and more mainstream, sort of accepted even among sitting politicians. And so I think that was a real warning sign that, I wish more people had listened to, because what we've seen even this week with the removal of Liz Cheney is, that what we see now in a movement is really not about conservative principles anymore. It's ideological, but it's not about the sort of conservative principles of Reagan or even what Cheney upheld. It really is about a kind of raw power for its own sake and the means of maintaining that power. And this is a minority of people. I'm not suggesting conservatives are all violent, but the minority of people that were willing to go and storm the Capitol, the minority of people that, in my state of Michigan, who plotted to kidnap my governor, this has sort of become a mainstream part of our politics. And that's part of what I find so both terrifying and horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wonder if I mean, I am maybe a little bit less convinced that there were those conservative, I don't know how you phrased it, values or ideological foundations
Sure.
were a little bit Potemkin as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think look, Lynn Cheney was, the iteration, and certainly Dick Cheney was the iteration, just sort of like, Donald Trump 1.0, or maybe Donald Trump 2.0, and Donald Trump is,
Sure.
Donald Trump 4.0. I don't know, but I think like these are just more sort of like refined versions of the same. This progression, right, has been heading there, and but that idea of violence, are there other strands? I mean, so I can see the one that comes from like the Bundys, looking at the other people in their specific situation, right? The Don sisters or Dan sisters, and losing legally. So they decide, or that's maybe it's not so straightforward. They decide, but that the options become more of violent, and they begin this notion of violence against the government when you don't get what you want. Essentially, it becomes more acceptable just because more and more people adopt it. What other strains led into that specific dynamic of the violence? Where else was that coming from?
Well, yeah, coming from a number of places. I think that one thing to note is throughout, whether it's the riot on the Capitol, the assault on the Capitol, whether it's rallies, whether it was the Bundy standoff in Nevada or Oregon, look for the symbols and listen for the rhetoric about things like the American Revolution, right? About, the Gladstone flag, don't tread on me. That part of what's valorized in this is, the myth of American independence, where what it took to overthrow the tyranny of the federal government was a violent uprising. And, we still teach that as, the liberation or the birth of the country. And so I think basically within the rhetoric, there's a kind of martial tendency, though I assume a majority of people don't mean that they want a literal revolution. But a percentage of people do. A couple other places that I would point to, one, I already mentioned some of the key militia movements. The militia organizations, which have grown in number, these are groups that train regularly. And the assumption is that the federal government or state governments are going to come and take your guns, and you have to be prepared not to and the rhetoric would be, we're not going to be the aggressors here. But when the federal government comes to violate my constitutional rights, I'll be prepared to defend myself. And this is important, I think, to think about, which is what gives that movement or people in the movement, I think that sense of power, of purpose, of meaning and belonging is precisely the fact that they're talking about possibly dying for their country in some abstract sense, possibly needing to kill for their country. Now, it's clearly not for their country, but I think the other movement that is deeply concerning is something called the constitutional sheriffs. So there's an organization, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, but it's an odd and clearly erroneous belief that county sheriffs are the highest elected law enforcement in the land, and therefore they are the highest, not only law enforcement, but sort of legal interpreters. And so for a sheriff who buys into the ideology, the assumption is if they individually believe that a law from the state or federal government is unconstitutional, they have not only a right, but a duty to oppose it. And so I think what you're seeing there is perhaps the most destructive, because now we have, people in uniform bearing the symbols of rule of law, who are the very ones undermining law. I mean, in my own state, after the Wolverine Watchmen plotted to kidnap Governor Whitmer, a sheriff to the county just south of me, Dara Leaf, said that, that might have been seen as a legitimate citizen's arrest because Whitmer had violated the Constitution. So the last thing I'd add is all of that then assumes, and this is also a bit frightening, a kind of populist understanding of the Constitution, that at the end of the day, I and I alone am the final authority in determining what the Constitution says. Elitists like judges, they can't be trusted. And so that's where there's the rhetoric of rule of law, and yet everything that we see, the actions, are fundamentally undermining the rule of law.
And I should just say, we've got to wrap it up here, but those people you're talking about, the sheriffs, they had to be ushered out of former Governor LePage's office in Maine by his advisors at one point, because LePage was meeting with them and they were suggesting you can assassinate members of the legislature who don't agree with you. I mean, that was a couple of years back, but yes. And I imagine we're going to see a lot more of this under a Biden administration. It is because they're going to know they're not going to get what they want, rather than having to wait as they might have done during the Trump administration. Jamie Skillen, the book is This Land Is My Land, Rebellion in the West. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the program.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break, then we'll come back, wrap things up. We are back. I have been corrected that I said Lynn Cheney again, as opposed to Liz Cheney.
All right. Have you ever considered hypnosis?
Look, I think everybody knows who I'm talking about at this point. Cheney. That's how I'm going to refer to her from now on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just save yourself.
This part about the sheriffs, very scary. And you can go back into history, folks, and these type of anti-government assaults happen predominantly during Democratic administrations. So buckle up. We are not done. And with the encouragement they're getting from members of the House and, frankly, the Senate, we can expect more of this type of thing. And it will grow. It will grow. And that is our time for today. Emma and I will be back tomorrow, Friday. See you then. And for those of you who are not watching us on Peacock, see you now. Emma is going to lead us into the fun half. We're anticipating old Matt will show up and Brandon Sutton will be here. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member at jointhemajority.report.com, I am $1 closer to getting hypnosis so that I can remember it's Liz and not Lynn Cheney. So jointhemajority.report.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And check out the AM Quickie and
you know why you're saying that, Sam? That's his wife.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. It's Lynn Cheney is his wife. Yes,
right.
No, I'm not. I am. Yes.
Okay.
And I've, been talking about Lynn Cheney for years. It's a story. I am not going to get into it now, but
right.
Yes. So it's not just a forgetting. I confuse her with her mom.
I forgot her name was Lynn.
And so. I don't call her Mary Cheney.
Right.
So, which is the other sister who, Liz Cheney basically threw under the bus because she had to get elected and didn't want to be associated with a sister who
was gay,
and was for marriage equality. But that's it for me. Don't forget, you can check out Nomi's show The No McKee Show. You can find that at youtube.com, The No McKee Show.